Whoa, what happened? I've only been here for 2 minutes. You already shoot someone?
One thing that's always fascinated me about Barry is the way it films and treats violence. So much of the action we see is presented in a passive way. You're not supposed to notice the people who die or get injured or lose, unless the loser is a main character who is either essential to the story in a singular appearance, or someone you know is coming back in another installment. But Barry approaches action in a completely different way. Instead of leaning into spectacle, it wants to make violence feel much more consequential. And in doing so, it highlights how absurd the concept of violence is by turning normally fast-paced, emotionally charged sequences into, well, this. This is how Bill Hader wanted to approach violence from the start. His action feels more like comedy, and it's always caught me off guard in a good way. As he puts it,
you should feel uncomfortable or thrown by it as opposed to, that was rad.
To make that feeling possible, Barry shoots action scenes in exactly the opposite way everyone else does. For instance, take a look at this scene where the Chechens are the victims of a hit.
So, from up here you can see whole operation, eh?
The camera is placed behind this guy who's showing his bosses a bird's eye view of his drug operation in this empty parking lot. Then, without warning, 4 black trucks appear, armed soldiers get out, and one of them shoots a guy who reacts like this. Everything about this scene so far is weird, right down to the fact that the guy who's just shot in the left shoulder was previously shot by Barry in season 2, also in the left shoulder.
What happened?
Then, as the gunfighting starts, a police squad arrives on the other side, crashing into one of the tents. Unlike the Bolivians who arrived seconds before, the police are completely discombobulated, which adds to the chaos of the scene. And then without warning, a guy blows himself up in front of the police cars, and all of this happens while the camera is mostly static and far away from the action. No quick cuts, no additional angles, except for a slightly tighter one that evokes the shaky smartphone the Chechen boss is holding. And we even cut to a FaceTime with his bosses, who are watching it the same way we are.
We're going to have talk about your future.
If this were some other show or movie, this scene might go more like this. First, we'd probably be at ground level as the 4 trucks pull in. Same with the police cars on the other side. Then we get some quick cuts of the soldiers getting out of the car, followed by a reverse to the Chechens coming out of the tent, followed by a dramatic look at the guy getting shot, and probably not saying. This all happens in the span of a minute, and it captures many of the tenets of Barry's action philosophy. The next example is one that up until recently was Barry's most talked about action sequence. It's from the beginning of Ronnie Lily, where Barry goes into this house to theoretically try to kill.
That's Ronnie Broxton. He's fucking my wife.
What?
The exposition for this scene is awesome. Barry doesn't even want to kill this guy in the first place, half-heartedly telling Ronnie to go with him. But then as he walks through the house, he runs into a gigantic trophy room that tells him and the audience that this is the last guy he should be messing with.
What's the worst thing that he could see when he goes to get the bags? They're just like, oh, what if he has a Taekwondo trophy? And then it's like, what if the whole room's filled with Taekwondo trophies? Hey, whose Taekwondo trophies are these?
After a bit more lackluster convincing, Ronnie kicks Barry to the ground, which starts the fight. Unlike the previous example, this fight, the first part of it at least, is filmed up close and in a oneer, which makes it feel closer to a more typical action scene. But it sets itself apart in 3 ways. The first one, fatigue. This fight quickly turns into a scrum after we see an out-of-shape Ronnie become too tired to do anything else other than bear hug Barry. He tries to get some kicks in and show a little of the training and expertise his trophy room highlights, but he simply doesn't have the stamina to do so. Barry too is struggling to keep up with even a fraction of Ronnie's strength, which makes the fight feel even more exhausting. The second thing, and something this scene has in common with the previous and upcoming example, is that there's no music. If you've ever watched a video on this channel, you know I like to talk about music. It takes a scene out of reality in a way, reminding us that the filmmakers are trying to heighten our experience in any way possible. By excluding it though, the action feels more real. It's not promoting as much passive enjoyment, and instead makes things awkward. We're just watching 2 guys wrestle each other for a really dumb reason. The last defining element of this scene is its general absurdity. In the last part of this fight, Ronnie tries to flex on Barry by spinning around his nunchucks for a really long time. But what makes it funnier is that on set, he didn't even do it this long.
I found it so funny that when we were in the edit, Jeff Buchanan, the editor of that episode, I said, can you just double it? So if you watch it, he does it once, and then it cuts to Barry. And when it cuts back, that's the exact same shot again, because I just thought it was really funny. I was like, and he goes, what, you just want him to sit there and just, like, he's like, he's showing off, like he's trying to intimidate him. And he went, so Barry just is sitting there watching him do that, and I go, yeah. He was like, all right.
This already weird fight ends when Ronnie simply collapses from a broken windpipe he picked up earlier. But when I'm talking about general absurdity, what I'm really referring to is his daughter.
I thought you were a dog.
Who throughout the episode demonstrates that she is more animal than human. She leaps all over Barry in a fight early on, and then reappears to jump on top of trees and roofs and eat people's faces.
Barry, get your gun. Shoot her off my face.
After watching the first exhausting fight, the last thing anyone would expect is another fight, especially one even weirder. And she never leaves them alone. She's always hanging around.
Looks like a little gargoyle up there.
This fight fills even more of the picture that Barry's trying to paint with its action. And the motorcycle chase late in season 3 fills in the rest.
Oh, shit.
This scene also starts in an awkward manner. This bike gang pulls up to Barry's car to confirm it's him.
I think this is the guy. Is this the guy?
Yeah, this is the dude.
And as soon as they do, he takes off. They chase him in his car and then on a motorcycle that he took from a member of the crew that was launched into the windshield of said car, all on public streets and highways. This scene has bystanders everywhere, from postmen to the people in all these cars to people at this car dealership later on. This chase takes place out in the open, where people are at risk of being caught in crossfire. This setup, though, paves the way for some remarkable filmmaking. Barry emerging onto the highway is a thing of beauty. The wide shots of the other bikes following behind are equally great. But here's where Barry differentiates itself from other highway or motorcycle chase scenes, even other super inventive ones. Barry gets into traffic. This replaces the usual type of high octaneness we get in highway scenes, where the characters zip around no cars or at most modestly spaced out cars, with a set piece that requires Barry to zip in between the gridlock to continue the chase, which leads to some great sound design. Give this a listen. Also, Barry doesn't directly kill anyone in this scene. In trying to get away from the bike gang, almost all of them end up offing themselves, whether that's due to bad timing, lack of team coordination, or in the last part of the scene, an unexpectedly good shot at the car dealership. These scenes are all exciting and inventive, but at the end of the day, they're all meant to drive home one overarching message: that violence has consequences. From the immediate fallout of people running away from danger, to the long-term fallout of the terrible things Barry's done. We see Barry hurt and kill a lot of people, and in turn he's haunted by his victims in both his thoughts and in real life through the people they left behind.
Why, Chris? He was a sweetheart and he looked up to you. But you had to take him out, right?
This show doesn't let us forget the aftermath of its violence. Events that Barry and the audience may have thought were way in the past come back with a vengeance, and he has to live with that. Although this show may technically be a dark comedy with some unrealistic over-the-top elements, it never shies away from what the real consequences of a life like Barry's would be. We go into those dark places whether we want to be there or not. And that's why Barry's action is the best.